This most recent decision by the Supreme Court is an extremist revision of the Second Amendment that challenges 200 plus years of jurisprudence. It's often said, that you are entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. And like your own facts, you, including the Supreme Court, are not entitled to their own history. And that's exactly what this is. It's challenging 200 plus years of jurisprudence. This further deregulates our militia at a time when the nation's domestic tranquility is already under threat and is being severely diminished by our unregulated militia.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, let me tell you, the Democrats and the woke revolutionaries are having an epic meltdown as I'm making this video over a major Supreme Court decision that shoots down a New York rule that set an unreasonable standard to carry a firearm in that state, specifically when we're talking about concealed carry, okay? And the conservative Supreme Court majority, led by Justice Thomas, struck down New York's unconstitutional restrictions on concealed carry licenses, okay? And I'm gonna tell you, if you actually look into what is required to get a concealed carry permit in New York, it is absolutely ridiculous, okay? In fact, take a look at this video from John Stossel in which he details how hard it is to actually get a gun in the state of New York. It is absolutely silly. Take a look.
Are you allowed to carry a gun for safety? The Supreme Court's weighing in on that. The issue?
Whether the government must let residents carry a handgun in public.
I know a little about this conflict because I once tried to get a carry permit in my town. They didn't make it easy. This is 50 pages. The form says I must promise I know the definition of other weapons like metal knuckle knife, a kung fu star. I don't want a kung fu star. I just want a gun for safety. It took hours just to fill out the forms. Then you have to go in person to police headquarters. Here they fingerprinted me, asked me to give reasons why I should be allowed to have a gun, and they charged me a $430 application fee. Half a year later, they told me, no, you may not have a carry permit. They said I could try again if I could prove a special need for a gun. And I tried that. I showed them threats on my life. Not good enough, they said later. Yet other people got permits. Big celebrities got them. So did the politically connected.
Friends of the ruling class, that's who gets it. Everyone else, you're out of luck.
I wasn't famous enough. But I probably would have gotten a permit if I had bribed the cops in the permit department. Turned out they were taking
lavish gifts in exchange for gun permits.
So were some politically connected lawyers like this man. And a man with police connections was caught
offering cops as much as $6,000 to issue gun permits without doing background checks.
In other places, a political contribution got people permits. Scams like that thrive whenever politicians pass too many laws.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, the only people that are really allowed to have guns in New York are not law-abiding citizens, okay? But the privileged and the wealthy, right? The well-connected, and criminals. Because, criminals don't follow the laws, which, again, is why New York has so much gun violence. Because criminals don't follow laws. Again, a prime example of how this stuff simply does not work, okay? It does not work. So we're going to read a little bit about the decision and opinion from the Supreme Court. Now, we're not going to get into the details because this video is not meant to go into the details. It's just meant to basically go over the basics of what's going on here in this case of the New York Pistol and Rifle Association versus Bruin. And then we're going to get into the Democrat reaction and how they're basically saying that we're not going to go along with the Supreme Court's ruling, which in my opinion basically is the Democrats once again doing their own version of an insurrection, right? And then they'll turn around and lecture Republicans on civility in politics and going along with the law of the land and all the other stuff when, again, they clearly don't care when they lose, right? They don't care about following the Constitution. They don't care about your fundamental rights and freedoms, like, again, the right to protect yourself in self-defense, right? Which clearly New York does not care about. They don't even think that that's a good enough reason to carry a firearm, which, again, that in and of itself really blows my mind. That if you go to the state and say, hey, can I get a concealed carry permit? I need a gun for self-defense. They say, no. That's not a good enough reason, right? Like what? What? Like that is like the foundation of what the Second Amendment is about, right? It is clearly unconstitutional to restrict people from keeping and bearing arms for self-defense purposes. But to be quite honest with you, you really shouldn't need a reason at all, right, to carry a weapon if you are a law-abiding citizen, right? Just being a citizen of the United States is all the reason that you need. Why do I need to tell the government why I need it? All they need to know is that the Constitution acknowledges my rights that have been bestowed to me by God, which is my right to keep and bear arms, okay, and that shall not be infringed, period. Period. The Second Amendment is not there so that the government can limit the rights of the people. The Second Amendment is there so that the people can limit the government, right? Specifically a tyrannical government, which seems to be what has happened in this country. The Democrat-run government is becoming more tyrannical and tyrannical by the day. So with that being said, let's go ahead and read a little bit about this and this decision, and then we're going to get to the Democrat meltdown. The Supreme Court Thursday ruled 6-3 that New York's regulations that made it difficult to obtain a license to carry a concealed handgun were unconstitutionally restrictive and that it should be easier to obtain such a license. The existing standard required an applicant to show, quote, proper cause for seeking a license and allow New York officials to exercise discretion in determining whether a person has shown a good enough reason for needing to carry a firearm, stating that one wished to protect themselves or their property was not enough. Wow, that is absolutely insane to think about. Saying, look, I want to carry a firearm to protect myself. The state says, no, you don't need a firearm to protect yourself, right? Use your hands and fists. But we're going to keep all the weapons. And we're also going to give all the weapons to the rich and powerful. And the criminals are also going to get weapons too. But you, the law-abiding citizen, okay, you don't need one. Absolutely incredible that this stood as long as it did, right? Again, this is why Justice Thomas is an absolute hero, right? Let's read this. Quote, in this case, petitioners and respondents agree that ordinary law-abiding citizens have a similar right to carry handguns publicly for their self-defense. We too agree and now hold consistent with Heller and McDonald that the Second and Fourth Amendment protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home, Clarence Thomas wrote in the court's opinion, referencing two previous gun cases. Quote, because the state of New York issues public carrying licenses only when an applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense, we conclude that the state's licensing regime violates the Constitution. Thomas noted that the state statute does not define what, quote, proper cause means, and that courts had ruled that the standard was met by people who showed a special need for protection, aka the rich and the famous, right? The rich and the famous, the rich and the powerful. That's basically what it comes down to. And the irony here, guys, is that these type of restrictions effectively ban law-abiding citizens from being able to carry guns in a state like New York, because a lot of people really just like, yo, there's so many rules and regulations that I'm just not going to do it, right? Just forget it. It's not worth it. Again, this is what Democrats accuse Republicans of doing when it comes to voting rights, right? Except Republicans are not nearly as restrictive when it comes to voting rights as Democrats are when it comes to the Second Amendment rights, okay? Imagine if Republicans actually did this with voting rights, where it was like, yo, you need a special cause in order to vote. Wanting to participate in democracy is simply not enough reason, right, for you to be able to vote. Democrats would lose their minds, okay? We don't have standards like this for any other constitutional right except the Second Amendment, which the Democrats have abused when it comes to restricting, okay? So that being said, again, Justice Thomas is a hero for this, okay? This is a win for Second Amendment advocates across the country. And let's go ahead and get into the Democrats' meltdown over this win for the Second Amendment. And let's start with the Biden administration, namely Biden himself and Kamala Harris.
We, the president, myself, many of us are deeply concerned and troubled by the Supreme Court's ruling today. It, I believe, defies common sense and the Constitution of the United States.
I am disappointed in the Supreme Court gun decision. There is one little bit of solace in the minority making up the majority opinion has laid out that it affects not every state. It affects only 40 states, a lot of states it affects. And the phrase that I found noticeable was There's a difference between states that say may and say shall. If you have to say you shall give, you shall do A, B, C, they're the ones that are going to have problems. But most say may. I mean may, and I got it reversed, may and shall. And so the gun laws in 40 of these states are still in place based on the decision. Not good enough, but it's. I think it's a bad decision. I think it's not reasoned accurately, but I'm disappointed.
Incredible, right? Incredible. I love how these Democrats, and David Hogg too at the beginning of this video, they think they know more about the Constitution than Clarence Thomas, right? And these Supreme Court justices. That's what really blows my mind, right? Kamala and David Hogg really just said that ruling that, hey, you know, the states cannot sit here and restrict people's rights unnecessarily to carry firearms is a violation of the Constitution. I would love for somebody to ask a follow-up question and say, okay, well, what part of the Constitution does this ruling violate? Okay, I would love to see Kamala try to reason through that. But with that being said, their responses weren't nearly as bad as the responses from some of the gun grabbing state governments, particularly some of these city governments that have imposed these restrictions in the first place. And we're going to go ahead and get into reaction, starting with Lori Lightfoot, who had a meltdown over this, then the state government of New York and the city of New York. Take a look.
But unfortunately, given the composition of this court, we're not surprised that they struck down the New York law. The fact that the court is coming down with this decision feels tone deaf. And I worry that it undermines the legitimacy of the court, particularly given the leaked draft of the Roe decision. And we're obviously anxious and concerned about what the depth of that decision is going to be.
We just received some very disturbing news from Washington that the Supreme Court of the United States of America has stripped away the state of New York's right and responsibility to protect its citizens with a decision which we are still digesting, which is frightful in its scope of how they are setting back this nation and our ability to protect our citizens back to the days of our founding fathers.
While nothing changes today, and we want to be clear on that, nothing changes today. We have been preparing for this decision and will continue to do everything possible to work with our federal, state, and local partners to protect our city. We will collaborate with other mayors, municipality leaders, and governors, and will leave no unturned stone as we seek to undo and mitigate the damage that we are witnessing today. Those efforts would include a comprehensive review with the Corporation Counsel, our Chief Counsel, and other legal experts to assist us in this matter. As we start to define sensitive locations when carrying a gun is banned, and reviewing our application process to ensure that only those who are fully qualified can obtain a carry license. This is something that the police commissioner who's joining me today will ensure that our licensing division is aware of. We will work together to limit the risk this decision will create once it is implemented. And we cannot allow New York to become the Wild Wild West. That is unacceptable. This decision is created. We will not allow our city to live in fear that everyone around us is armed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor said, this case has been remanded back to the lower court. So the important thing to know today is that nothing changes. If you have a premise permit, it does not automatically convert to a carry permit. If you carry a gun illegally in New York City, you will be arrested. Nothing changes today, and that's important for everyone to be aware of. When we open the universe of carry permits, it potentially brings more guns to the city of New York and to the streets of New York City, and that should concern us all. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, so I find it fascinating how these same people, right, that claim to be so concerned about the protection of civilians from firearms have utterly failed to protect civilians, a lot of whom are not armed, from criminals with firearms, right? Mayor Eric Adams is talking about how New York City won't turn into the Wild Wild West. I'm like, bruh, it's already the Wild Wild West, okay? It's already Wild Wild West. But basically what they're saying here is that we're going to find a way around it, and we're going to try to reverse and overturn the Supreme Court's decision, okay? They said that nothing changes, right? Nothing changes, and we're going to continue to try to unconstitutionally restrict your right to carry, okay? But as bad as their responses were, there was no response that was as bad as Keith Olbermann, who at this point is a certified crazy guy. And for whatever reason, I don't understand why he's still allowed on social media. But we all know that leftists get privileged when it comes to being able to say what they want on social media. As this guy, again, is literally calling for insurrection against the Supreme Court. As he says, quote, "It has become necessary to dissolve the Supreme Court of the United States. The first step is for a state the court has now forced guns upon to ignore this ruling. Great, you're a court. Why and how do you think you can enforce your rulings?" Incredible. This will be a good moment to remind new readers that the Second Amendment has nothing to do with gun ownership, private or otherwise. The Constitution and the amendments team with property references, yet the word own is not in the Second Amendment, nor is any synonym. Again, wow. This guy is literally calling to dissolve the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court made rulings that we don't like, so tear it down. Tear it down, right? He's saying ignore the court, ignore the laws of the land. Again, these are the people that want to complain about a so-called insurrection when these guys, when they don't get their way, they're saying, you know what, let's just tear down the institution. Again, it's not just with the Supreme Court. When it comes to anything they don't get their way on, right? The whole so-called social justice protest of 2020 was about tearing down the United States government, right? That's what it was about. Because the government and our laws are apparently systemically racist. So they wanted to tear down the whole system. Okay? This is what they want to do, right? When they don't get their way. You know, these people have no leg to stand on when it comes to democracy at all. They have no leg to stand on. And this is why the American people don't trust the Democrats when it comes to democracy, because of stuff like this, right? They're constantly trying to go against democracy, but at the same time, their mouth, they'll tell you how much they're trying to save democracy. But with that being said, the last part of what I want to say here real quick is that this is why elections are important, right? Kudos to Mitch McConnell, who, again, ironically, at the same time is, you know, teaming up with the Democrats to pass, you know, gun control legislation, particularly provide funding to states that want to implement red flag laws that, you know, a whole lot of conservatives are upset with. But regardless, he did do what he had to do under the Obama administration to stop him from appointing more judges in the appellate courts and at the Supreme Court level, which basically led the way for Trump to come in and start appointing judges left and right that really play a key part in getting to where we're getting now, where the Supreme Court is making ruling after ruling after ruling that conservatives love, okay? So again, this is why elections matter, okay? The Supreme Court arguably is the most important institution in this country right now, and that is why the leftists are trying to tear it down, right? It's only a matter of time before they start to call Clarence Thomas the N-word, right? I'm telling you, that's how pissed off they are. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.